as we start chapter 29, we're beginning to look at the Industrial Revolution. So we've alluded to it in a few chapters previously, but now we're going to start taking a deeper look and dive into the changes that come out of the Industrial Revolution and how that's going to affect society in Europe, in the Americas, in Asia and Africa. So this is going to have long-lasting effects because the world has kind of obviously been very much changed by this production. So when we talk about the Industrial Revolution, we're talking about the move from an agrarian society that's using, handcraft tools. So think, agricultural based, using predominantly human and animal, power to get things done, very singular in terms of most crafts, to an economy based on machine and technology for manufacturing and factories, increased productivity in numbers, urbanization, and just overall industry. So some background to the Industrial Revolution here. Okay, so it develops first in England just to really more or less to a number of factors in terms of the government in place being very much in favor of capitalism, so that also plays in with the joint stock companies and the wealth that's been accumulated over time. So very loose government policies. The fact that they have a lot of coal deposits. Actually, if you kind of look at this map, they have a number of different industrial areas that were kind of set up for it. And then they also have the labor force that would also allow for it at the same time. So they have that advanced agricultural production that also helps, as well as population growth. So thus they need a number of people that actually can work in said factories to produce a lot of goods. All right, so it's more stable food supply, leading to an increased number of consumers, and thus we need less people for agriculture so they can go off and pursue other types of work. So also, as we said, access to coal instead of wood for fuel, and also the initial, or what will eventually become steam power, is the main source for producing things of steel and iron. In order to make better and safer or not necessarily safer products, but better products a lot more efficiently, and a lot better, especially again when the machines can do it with steel and iron much faster than human hands can, right? Which makes it cheaper to produce, more affordable. Thus, people are going to start buying more. Okay, and then we also have, as England, you can't see on this map here, but a lot of different rivers and waterways, access to the sea in order to transport goods in, products or things from the factories. To the markets, and not only in England but also again abroad throughout much of Europe and the rest of the world, but also bringing in materials to make goods and products. So again, a lot England is still importing from a lot of their colonies at this point in time. So in the Americas, from the Caribbean, from India. India is not exactly a colony right now, but again, the British East India Company is taking in a lot of goods from again South and Southeast Asia. So turning in those products and bringing them to Europe, turning them into finished products, and then selling them back out. And some of that obviously staying in England in terms of like finished products. So that's kind of where those colonies become really, really important to then sell. And then they have, as we said, strong banking and government institutions to support them. All right. So this will lead to more innovations in transportation that you will use steam power later on. So again, railroads, steamships to increase again. Distance traveled, the amount of energy needed, because again, you're not relying on animal energy or wind energy. You think about, sails on ships. And now you can do it and travel essentially at any time of year for the most part, under those conditions, which actually makes it, in the long run, more affordable. And also you can build bigger ships and they can carry more cargo. Same thing with railroads. Makes transportation in the long run much, much cheaper. Okay, so some of the changes that come out of this, as we now get what we call the factory system. So if we think back to when we talked about what had been in place beforehand, in Europe we initially had the guild system. Okay, so think about that as kind of like a beginning of a trade union system where people are, working in an industry, prepping as like an apprentice for a number of years, and then they go off and form their craft, whether that is with clothes, whether that is, blacksmithing. You could think about so many different examples, but I want to use like those two kind of as the beginning parts. All right, and so they're trained in and they set the standard of the quality of goods, they set their prices, and essentially they're working together to, or other guilds or members of a guild will essentially support one another, and they're the ones controlling the industry. And then we switch to, again, during the time of European exploration and beginning of colonization and things of that nature, we begin to see more of the cottage industry, or what we call the putting out system, where Europeans are now bringing goods back over from their colonies, and they're putting them in cottages where the families are producing everything by hand, or family members, or no more than 10 really in a place, producing stuff on like looms and things for cotton, and that leads to mass production. But again, as factories become more of the norm, again, due to the increase of technology and the use of, steam and coal power, that is going to essentially really lead to a lot better productivity and less handwork and a lot more efficiency because it's going to take less time. All right, so that's where all that comes in, because also we're thinking about large investments, better transportation, okay, that allow for, increased production. And the book really does explain that pretty well. So they build new large factories that are too big for the cottages because, again, people are working out of their homes to produce the goods more efficiently. Hence, massive production floors that have these massive machines in there that are going to take a lot more energy, a lot more time to build in the first place, and also obviously more room to store, and cottages just can't offer that. And also you can bring in more workers to work more consistently, more frequently to, build more goods. So work becomes more specialized to, it's just to say one task there, not task, via the division of labor. So instead of, within the guild system where, someone became really, really good at this, making clothes, like being a tailor or, being a blacksmith, and they worked their entire life at, doing that, 5 or 10 plus years of building that skill to become the best. It was a skill that took a lot of time. Now we're starting to see more specialization in terms of what we call the division of labor, going back to sort of an assembly line process, or what's going to be the first part of the assembly line process, where you're working one or two specific tasks. Doesn't take you a whole lot of training to get, or a whole lot of training to get used to that task, in order for you to do it repetitively at a very quick pace in order to produce, again, more goods. Because the guild system had fewer workers, more people could be specialized in a number of different tasks, and that was more expensive and time consuming. When you can speed up the process, it becomes cheaper, especially the more workers you're having. You would think, more workers, wouldn't that make it more expensive? Not if you can produce more goods and have a much bigger margin for producing more goods at cheaper rates will sell you more products. All right. Also, and this comes with Mr. Eli Whitney of the Cotton Gin, and I didn't actually, maybe I knew this, maybe I didn't, I don't remember anymore. Maybe I knew it at one point, but the idea of interchangeable parts. So this means that instead of, when you manufacture something, you have to manufacture every little thing for it, and there's only one piece that fits for this one specific, item. Now, if you're mass producing, something like, and as they mention here with a gun or a rifle, now it can be essentially you take one part of one rifle and you can put on another part of another rifle and it'll work just as fine. Instead of stuff that was handcrafted before where it may not work if they're similar but not the same. And we can think about this today. I'm throwing up a different, more current technologies here, but think about car wheels. Okay, take one Honda Civic from another Honda Civic, the wheels should work the same. Same thing with, windows. They're essentially designed for a similar type of car, but it doesn't have to be the same car. So again, the same Honda Civic will, or a same type of Honda Civic, instead of each car having a different window or windshield, same thing with, computers, phones, what have you. All right. So that becomes really, really important under this factory system. All right. So as it starts off in Europe, it slowly begins to spread to other parts of Europe and the world. Couldn't keep it a secret for long. The book kind of mentions, hiring of people or trying to steal people, to kind of get Britain secret. Nothing you can really hide around the world for a very long time. So this is where we start to finally see Europe finally take hold in terms of selling products around the world and becoming a main power in it. Because, still, even at this point in time, going back, to the early 1700s, most of the products that the Europeans are selling is to the rest of Europe or to their colonies. It's not to China, it's not really to India. There is a little bit going on there. But for the most part, they're still buying products from those people, and in exchange they're giving, weapons, or they're giving silver. Again, there's not a whole lot of products that, the rest of the world wants from Europe. Europe is still on the fringe up through the Industrial Revolution when they become the leaders, where they are now making products that other people and other civilizations are wanting. And as we'll see with the imperialism chapter, that is going to change the shape of the world, or kind of the way things are done, kind of a continual movement from where we started with the Silk Road. We're seeing continuities, but we're seeing a lot of changes. All right. At the same time, this is also happening within the same rate as we see nationalism. And also, as I said, before a minute ago, imperialism. So these things are happening at the same time, so they're happening concurrently together. All right. So we can kind of see that spread where these different pockets are happening, and this will also lead to urbanization too, which is for another day. So in terms of the relative share of manufacturing world output, so I'm not a fan of the fact that they use the term third world here. I was trying to find a good table or a good chart that I found, somewhere else online. And unfortunately, they all use the word third world, and I'm not a fan of it. Unfortunately, that's the one I could find without trying to reproduce this all on my own. So Europe as a whole in 1750 was producing a decent amount of the world's manufacturing. Okay, I think China and India, and also Pakistan, were producing a very large amount too. They were producing the majority, about 3/4. Okay. But over time, we see Europe shifting back. So when we talked about manufacturing, talking about, again, those produced finished products, so while Europe was producing a decent amount, okay, it was spread throughout Europe. Okay, well, for the most part, it was China and Pakistan that were doing the vast majority of those finished products, and that kind of went down, and we'll revisit this more with imperialism, for why that is that by 1900, they, instead of having 73% of the world share, they have 11%. While Europe goes from 23% to 62%, the United States about a fourth all on its own. And Japan is, kind of floating around there. All right, so you can also think about this in the term of the fact that when we talked about Latin America and, how Europe has kind of a stranglehold on them in terms of, investment in manufacturing, this is where we talked about, Europe or Great Britain, saying Latin America is ours or Central America is ours if we don't mess this up, okay, because they know that they have the ability to outmanufacture most of the world or large parts of the world for trade and make a lot of money on it because they have that advantage of Europe first. And then Europe, will catch on, as we see within these different pockets of, where you see ironworks, where you see emerging industrial industries are also around very major cities. That'll be brought up alongside railroads, which will be complete, and these are the ones by 1850. So again, railroads are also really important with all this too, and access to the seas in order to create this level of trade. All right. So while it's happening in Western Europe and sort of Central Europe with Germany and Italy, other parts, so Southern Italy, Eastern parts, so think Russia, are indeed unfortunately falling behind. So, and that also leads to what we call industrial capitalism. This is more of a review from U.S. history, when we talked about, the idea of essentially, we need more money to invest to make these massive factories to produce all these goods. So that comes with a lot of capital, a lot of land, a lot of investment. And so that gets supported by banks and governments. And so unfortunately, what we end up seeing is the limiting in competition. So monopolies, trusts, things of that nature. So we kind of show that here. How do you dominate? Well, you have vertical integration where you own all the resources in terms of your production. Okay. So in terms of if I'm going to sell meat, I'm going to own the cattle, the slaughterhouses, the refrigerated rail cars, okay, meat packing plants, all that, in terms of having all levels of production in order to dominate and make sure I don't have competition or pay out to other programs. Or horizontal integration, I'm buying out the competition. So that's just kind of a brief overlay of the Industrial Revolution. So in the next video, we'll start talking about changes made into society and politics as a result of the Industrial Revolution, predominantly, again, focusing on Europe at this point in time.